Hello, kiddies. I'm Alice Cooper, and I'm on Sydney Taylor's podcast. And you better be listening because I know where you live.
You've tuned in to the most crazy rocking metal podcast on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metal from the Inside.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Metal from the Inside podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Taylor, and this week's guest needs no introduction. He is the legendary Alice Cooper, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, and one of my heroes. Thank you so much, Alice, for taking the time to come on the podcast this week.
Thank you, and I still have our friendship bracelet. When you
I
were
do
like
too. It's
12.
Yeah, that's a fun story. I've told it on the podcast before. Like I just told you, back when I was 15, so it's crazy, and I love that you still have that. It's so great. But we were kind of just talking before we got on about, the craziness of this last year, and how you had to get out of Germany right at the last second when COVID started. So it's kind of a loaded question, but I like to ask it at the beginning just because it's important to check in on each other. But how has the last year been for you? Because I mean, you've been in the industry for 50 years and you've toured for pretty much 50 years.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have a lot of time home normally. So what has this been like for you?
Well, the good thing about it is that even when I go on tour, Cheryl's in the show. So, I mean, when I leave home, I don't really leave home. I bring home with me. But I do, you have to leave the kids and the grandkids and all that, and yeah, I'm on the road 2/3 of the year, at least. When we had to cancel, 180 cities, 17 countries. And that's between my band and the Hollywood Vampires,
Right.
with Johnny and Joe. And so that was another 30 or 40 shows we had to cancel. But I'm looking on the horizon and I'm seeing all those shows being rebooked right now. So, we're going to be back out there probably end of summer, I would say. That's what it looks like. But, being home was, maybe I needed to take a year off. But we recorded an album. We recorded Detroit Stories. And it debuted at #1, which is something every 48 years, I try to get a #1 album,
Yeah, which, I mean, I was going to say, you've stayed busy. I mean, you're always busy when you're touring regardless. You have the radio show, you're always working on music, you're doing
Yeah.
a million things at once. But I mean, especially with this album, and I know you're already kind of in the talks of recording the next album, you always kind of stay busy. So, it's good to hear that something good came out of it because we got this album.
Well, I just got back from Nashville. Bob and I started working on the next album. And, when you're going to get an avalanche of records coming in this year, only because all of the musicians that I know, that I talk to, if you can't tour, you're going to record. You're going to write songs and record. So there's going to be a tsunami of albums coming out. I mean, they're all probably already done and ready to go. So, it's going to be like concerts too. When we go back out, everybody's going to be on tour. There's going to be a concert every night somewhere, which is great. I think it's going to be bigger than ever. People always say, well, it'll never be the same. And I said, why would you wear a mask if you've been inoculated and everybody there has been inoculated and there's no more disease? Why would it be different? It should be bigger than it ever was, not smaller.
Yeah. And I think, I say this a lot just in this past year of, when I went to my last show, I am not even going to lie. It's, I was so used to going to shows, and, when you're doing something like that, you take it for granted because it's, it's just kind of what you do. You go to concerts, you play a show, it's just how your life has gone and what you've always done. And then, it's kind of taken away from you for a little bit. And I think that when shows do come back, it's going to be something that people enjoy, kind of like you said, like 10 times more, because, we're not going to be taking it for granted as much anymore. We've had to live without them for a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, I think people are starving for live entertainment anymore.
Yeah.
And, we did a thing the other night for Solid Rock. I have this charity called Solid Rock that any teenager can come in and learn any instrument and all that. But we fund it by a golf tournament, and at Christmas, the Christmas pudding, which all involves me inviting whoever shows up. And the band we did a outdoor show at night in Arizona, which was nice, about 1,000 people. Everybody was in their own place, I had Tommy from Kiss on guitar, and Chuck Eric on bass, and Fitz on drum. Everybody was from a different band. Damon Johnson, from Thin Lizzy on guitar. So, and let me see, the guys from Asia showed up, and Lou Graham from Foreigner. And I mean, it was on and on. My son's band was there, and it was such a great night. It was about 80 degrees, and it was just fun to get up on stage and play anything. We were doing everybody else's music and some of ours, but did a lot of covers, and everybody had a great time. So, I mean, I could just tell by the feel of that audience that it was like a relief that there was live music again.
Yeah, it's seeing that, like you kind of said, with the shows that are starting to get booked and announced, and it's kind of like we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and the vaccine's rolling out even better. So I completely agree. I think when it comes back, it's going to be better than ever.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the 50th anniversary of this album, which is one of my favorites. And it's been 50 years since this album came out this year. And I mean, of course, every Alice Cooper fan knows it. It has I'm 18, it has Ballad of Dwight Fry, it has all those kind of classics, but it has some songs that often go under the radar that I love, Caught in a Dream, Long Way to Go, all of those songs. So, how does it feel for you to kind of reflect on this album? You're 50 years out from it. You're still working, you're still touring, you're in 2 bands. What does it feel like to think back on that time and, writing and recording that record?
It's so funny. People, I think that I'm nostalgic, and I am to a point. Of course, I look back at those days and go, those were the greatest days. They were so much fun because you were creating, and it was getting accepted for once. For once we were getting played on the radio. I mean, we never thought we'd ever get played on the radio until Bob Ezrin came along and with this album, with Love It to Death. I think Bob gave us an identity with that album. Before that, Pretty's for You and Easy Action really were not Alice Cooper albums. They were all written when we were the Nas or we were the Spiders. All those songs were. And so Love It to Death came along, and Bob literally we kept working on the music until it sounded like Alice Cooper. Like when you hear a Doors song, it's the Doors. When you hear, the Rolling Stones, it's the Stones. We didn't have that identity. We had all the notoriety, everybody knew about the show and everybody knew about Alice and everything. But if you played an Alice Cooper song, it could have been anybody. Bob came along and really pinpointed the voice, the bass, the guitar sound, the drum sound, to when you heard Love It to Death, you went, oh, that's Alice Cooper. That's why I consider that the first Alice Cooper album. And we still do, we still do Dwight Fry. We still do, we do A Long Way to Go every once in a while. We do 18, of course. That was the big hit, Yeah. And at the time we were in Detroit with the Stooges and the MC5 and, Bob Seger and Ted Nugent and Susie Quattro. I mean, it was the greatest rock scene in America was Detroit at that time.
Yeah. And I love that whole story of you guys recording that record. You recorded it in that farmhouse, and, lots, what's happening there with Bob. And I love that you said that you kind of consider it the first Alice Cooper record, because I've always felt that way as well. It's not the debut, but it has always felt like the debut to me when it comes to the sound and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, again, the story I always think of when I think of Bob Ezrin producing that is the story of, he thought it said I'm edgy, and he heard you go on the, the 10-minute long jam, and he's like, we need to turn that into something. And he was right. But, it's the whole Alice Cooper band, you have Dennis, Glenn, Michael, Neil. And so it's been, 50 years since then. And something that I thought I would share with you, which is so great, because I spoke to Dennis. He was on the podcast not too long ago, and he showed me this great letter that he kept from you from like 1966 that he said that you sent him when he was working on his grandfather's farm
in Oregon.
Oregon, and you sent him a letter. He said he just found it, and you were asking him, or you were telling him what Beatles songs you guys should cover next when he got back home. And I thought that was so great, because it's incredible to see kind of that transition that you guys had from, being the Spiders and the Earwigs and, eventually going to this record.
Well, everybody started as a cover band. The Beatles started as a cover band. The Rolling Stones did. They didn't do any of their own material. First, hardly anything on the first 2 albums. But But so back then we were still in high school. I was like a senior in high school, and I think he just graduated, and we had just put the band together. And he spent the whole summer learning bass. You know, John Spear spent the summer drumming. Everybody, we didn't really get together till school started again. And by that time, everybody could play. Glenn Buxton was already a good player, you know. And then we could actually get into rehearsal and do 5 or 6 New Beatles songs or Rolling Stone songs or Yardbirds and stuff. We graduated into the Yardbirds because that was a little more complicated.
Yeah.
Or the Who, you know. But I mean, every single band started out as a covers band, and that's actually how the Vampires, you know, when I did the movie with Johnny Depp, Dark Shadows, and I was telling him about the drinking club, the Hollywood Vampires, with Harry Nilsson and John Lennon and everybody. We drank every night, and they called us the Hollywood Vampires because we drank all night. Nobody ever saw us during the day. That's what a vampire does, right? And he said, "Well, what if we put a band together and just did songs for all of our dead drunk friends? You know, all the guys that died as the vampires." And I went, "That's a great idea." And Joe Perry was there. He said, "I'm in." Duff McKagan, "I'm in." Da da da. And pretty soon that band was born, and it was basically. Now we're doing our own stuff, but I still always like to think of us as the world's most expensive bar band.
And it must be fun for you. And I ask this a lot, you know, the people who do covers and the artists who do covers. It must be fun for you to sometimes play songs that you grew up loving, you know, like a Yardbird song. You know, you obviously have to play the songs when you're performing live that are yours and have been, you know, known as Alice Cooper classics. But sometimes it must be nice to kind of get out of that element and go back to what really got you like invigorated to do this.
Well, the funny thing is that when I play Alice, in the Alice Cooper show, I never talk to the audience. I want Alice to be unworldly. I don't want him to relate to the audience. I want them to look at him as some arrogant villain, you know, condescending sort of, you know, really scary character. But at the same time, when I'm with the Vampires, I'm the lead singer in the Vampires. I'm not really the Alice Cooper that they see from Alice Cooper. So I talk to the audience all night, like I used to when I was in a bar band. And I'll tell them stories about the Doors, and I'll tell them stories about, you know, and then we'll do a Doors song, and I'll tell them a story about Keith Moon, and we'll do a Who song. And for me, it's a little bit of a relief that I even play guitar on 2 songs, and Johnny sings 2 songs, and Joe sings a couple, and I literally play guitar on them. So, you know, it's a real departure for me to be in the Vampires, because it's not the same kind of pressure it is to be. And when you're an Alice Cooper show, you better know where everything is going. You better be in the right place at the right time, or something, you'll get killed. I always tell the band when they get in, when they get in the band, I told Nita this. I said, "Nita, I can guarantee you 3 things. You're going to get paid. You're going to see the world. You're going to get stitches." Everybody in that band has had stitches.
I mean, it's bound to happen, right? When there's a guillotine involved.
Well, not just guillotine, but I mean, you know, I got switchblades, I've got swords, I've got everything up there, and I'm a little bit freewheeling. I don't necessarily look to where everybody is, and every once in a while they walk a little bit close and get nicked, you know, and those are not rubber swords.
No, they're real.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like you said, it must be cool for you guys to get out and do that in the Hollywood Vampires thing. And, you know, that's spawned a whole other band and a whole other kind of side gig for you that you've been doing for a couple of years now. So is there anything in the works for that album wise? Because I know that, you know, of course you have your career, Joe is Aerosmith, Johnny has his films, you know, is there anything that you guys have worked on over the course of the last year?
They've all been writing. Everybody's been writing. I got in touch with Johnny the other day, and he says, "I've been writing," and I said, "Good. Joe's writing. I'm writing. So when we get together, we'll have a ton of material to go through." And Tommy is a big element in that. Tommy Henriksen's a big element, and of course, you know, whoever's going to produce it. You know, Tommy produced the last album, the Rise album, but Ezrin produced the first one. And so it's a matter of who's going to produce and, you know, pick the best songs. We've been together 7 years. There's never been one argument in that band. There's never been one person ever raising their voice to anybody else in that band, which is the best way to tour, the best way to record. You're with your best friends, and nobody's an ego trip. and which is great, you know. And the same thing with my band, my tour band. Nobody ever argues in our band, you know. Ryan and Nita and everybody, Glenn, we're just, everybody's good friends.
Yeah, which is how it should be, right? I mean, you're also too at that point in your career where you can, pick and choose people who are positive, minded and have a good work ethic and all that fun stuff. So I mean, you at this point have earned, having a, a stress-free work environment.
Yeah. I've been in bands where it's been like where I couldn't wait for the tour to be over.
Yeah.
You know, and it was because I had hired 2 or 3 wrong people. They were great players, but they just were, constant chaos.
Yeah.
And I just, you don't need that on the road. It's hard enough to get out there and tour every night for, 180 times, let alone deal with that. So I always made sure after that everybody that was picked was people that were best friends. So, on nights off, everybody's going to the movies together. Everybody's going to the bars together. Everybody's doing this, and that's what it should be.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that you right now have a fantastic lineup. I love everybody in your band so much. It's probably my favorite lineup that you've had. And, since it started and since Nita came in, which I've loved every lineup since then, but I think that there's just kind of a magic that's happening here with this
band. This band is like that. They're so tight. They can't wait to get on stage. And they understand that, I said, when you get on stage, I want you to reek of ego. I want you to be a rock star. I want you to be up there bigger than life, and you own that stage. I want that. I want the audience to feel that. Off stage, I want just the opposite. I said, if I don't have an ego problem, nobody here should have an ego problem. Right. I said, so we're off stage. You sign everything. You take pictures. You're nice. You're happy. Everything, and everybody is that anyways. I don't have to tell them that. They're that.
And kind of going back to kind of Alice, as the character, something that I've heard you say many times before is, Alice kind of has always been this, icon and somebody that's kind of always represented the outcasts. It's been that way, since you guys, came out, and it's, stayed that way for people who are my age who, don't conform exactly to, mainstream popularity and to the societal, norms per se. So, I mean, when you were growing up, I mean, I know that you, of course, had a friend group and you were an artist and all this fun stuff. Did you ever really feel kind of like an outcast? And if you did, how did it feel to kind of become an icon and someone who kind of represented, that part of the youth?
Well, the outcast thing didn't really come till we got into rock and roll. We were more of a rock and roll outcast. I was Ferris Bueller in high school. I mean, I ran the school, basically. I had people doing my homework, it was so easy. I was just Mr. Personality. I made everybody laugh, boom, 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 And so I kind of I got myself through high school totally as a con man. and then when the band started, we realized that our band did not conform with other rock bands. We had this thing that kept us away from being in the center. We were the outskirt. And then I started realizing that's who our audience was the outcasts. And I said, well, we're an outcast, and that's an outcast. So we moved to Detroit, realized that Detroit's an outcast city. I mean, all the butt of the jokes are Detroit. And yet it's the hard rock capital of America. So look at all the outcasts that live in Detroit. I mean, look at the Iggy and the Stooges, the MC5. Everybody that came out of Detroit was some kind of rebel, and that's what we felt comfortable. But when we moved out of Detroit, we didn't fit in New York. We didn't fit in LA. We were the outcast band until we had hit records. Then all of a sudden, we were the it band. Yeah. Now everybody was looking at us, and we had to maintain our sort of personality. And we realized that we never bent to the charts. The charts had to bend to us. And when you have a #1 record, then everybody looks at you in the business, certainly the business guys, and goes, wait a minute, we need a band like Alice Cooper now in our record company. Because you became, if you have a hit record, you have the Willy Wonka golden ticket then, because you're making money for everybody. And that is what all they understand, the suits, is that you're making money. They don't care about the fact that 2 weeks ago, they wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. All of a sudden you're the thing now, and everybody has to, adhere to you. So I'm very proud in the fact that we never bent to the charts. The charts bent to us.
Yeah, it's the same people who walked out in the whiskey when everybody turned away. We're front row at the Hollywood Bowl, right?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Because then they kind of looked around and said, wait a minute, who are we supposed to like now? Oh yeah, we like Alice now. Yeah.
It's so interesting too. I mean, ever since you guys came out, there's always just been the stigma. And I think it's crazy because you guys were kind of right at the cusp, with the Black Sabbath and kind of this beginning of the hard rock and what would go on to be heavy metal. You guys were always pegged as being evil and quote unquote, being satanic and all of these these stereotypes. And I wanted to ask you about this because I saw an article today, like something about, like a hard rock radio station being like protested because, rock is satanic. And I just think it's crazy. Do you find it kind of insane that 50 years after you were being called evil and kind of being banned from countries and all this stuff that, that's kind of still sometimes a stigma that is kind of revolved around this type of music?
I think by now people understand that Alice is, a character, on Captain Hook, and they understand I've been very vocal about the fact that I'm Christian. I go to Bible study on Wednesday mornings, and there's nothing satanic at all in my show. There is horror in the show because I think that that's funny in some places. If you make fun of things that you're not supposed to make fun of, you're suddenly satanic. But back then I could see why they would put that moniker on us, because there was no way of comparing us to anything. So the closest thing they could come to was, oh, there's a snake in the show and he gets his head cut off. And instead of them thinking, oh, it's like a horror movie, it was all of a sudden became satanic,
right?
Which it never in the least bit. If I had thought that it was satanic, I would retire, because that's the last thing I would want to be thought of, is that. If you want satanic, politics is satanic, because what do rock and rollers want? They want to play music. They want to act it out on stage. The money is great. The girls are great. Okay, great. What does politicians want? Power. That's where satanic comes in, because musicians don't want power.
Yeah.
It was like, it's party all night long, Kiss kind of thing, and we want to create. We're artists. I mean, I have more Christian songs in my set than I have anything dark. If you really think of it, there are songs that are very, very Christian based, but nobody will ever see that. They'll see it as, the ones that want to see it as dark, they'll see it as dark. But a lot of my songs are actually warning against that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, kind of growing up and when I was getting into Alice Cooper and, and all that fun stuff, it's, I always saw kind of the soft side of Alice. I have always thought that you are such a great kind of like ballad writer, and you're so kind of, great at these kind of slower songs, which I feel like, I love the hard rock and stuff too, and so does, other fans. But you have some great ballads and kind of great love songs that I feel like a lot of people, sometimes don't think about when they think of Alice Cooper. Right. So I wanted to ask you, when you're writing, do you find that, you kind of have an easier time writing ballads and things like that? Or do you just enjoy them? Because I feel like they're some of your most standout songs, at least in my opinion.
Ballads are easier to write than hard rock songs. Especially when I was working with Dick Wagner. Dick Wagner and I wrote 4 ballads in a row that were hits, and for some reason we clicked with that. Only Women Bleed and You and Me, and I Never Cry, How Are You Gonna See Me Now? And we wrote 5 or 6, or my favorite, in fact, I think maybe my favorite song, 2 of my favorite songs I ever wrote was I Am Made of You and Might As Well Be on Mars, are 2 of the best songs I think I've ever written.
Yeah.
To me, it's easier to write that than it is to write Under My Wheels. because there's only so many chords, there's only so many words where you don't, it's easy to sound like somebody else during a hard rock song. Whereas a ballad, you could put a lot more heart, a lot more emotion into it, and you can, you can make it a much more individual song. Almost all those songs were written about Cheryl, and we've been married 45 years,
Yeah.
and so it was easy to write those songs because I had a great, somebody to write it about.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Might As Well Be on Mars, because I know that's one that's one of my favorite Alice Cooper songs. And it's funny talking to other diehard fans. Like I talk to Don Jameson all the time. He's one of my good friends, and he's very, into the old Alice catalog. And I mean, we talk about some of those kind of underrated songs all the time, and Might As Well Be on Mars always comes up.
Yeah.
And it's, it's one of your longest songs, and it's kind of hard to fit into a set and, to kind of to play it live. But to me, that's one of your most, I totally agree, it's one of your most standout tracks.
Well, when you write something that's, is not going to be a stage song, it's not going to be a stage song, but it's going to be a great album cut, and it probably is not going to be, one that even gets played on the radio.
Yeah.
But that song was written, and when we got done writing that song, we looked at each other and went, wow, that's really it. We can't do anything else to that song. That is just exactly what it should be. Something to Remember Me By was another song that Dick Wagner and I wrote that was just such a heartbreaker, but it was great. I mean, you knew when you finished it, it was what it was supposed to be. Simplicity is hard in rock. It's easy to write Halo of Flies. It's much harder to write I Never Cry, because one is so simple and the other one is the complicated. The complicated one's easy. Writing a Beatles song is the hardest thing in the world, because it's so simple.
Right. And one album I really wanted to talk to you before I let you go to was my personal favorite Alice Cooper album. And it's, again, talking about diehard fans. It's kind of one that I feel like all of us collectively kind of feel this way about. And that is From the Inside, which I have behind me.
I knew you were going to say that.
You knew it? It's one of those, it's, to me, one of your most musical, orchestral, lyrical albums that you've ever done. And, to this day was different from everything that you had done before, and is still kind of different than everything that you've done since. So do you have any memories of putting that record together? And, did you think that it would ever, be such a, I don't know, a mainstay in a fan's, collection?
Well, I had just coming out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And Bernie Taupin was my best friend. And so Bernie and I said, as a lyricist, Bernie, I'm going to tell you about all the characters I met in this insane asylum. It wasn't an insane asylum. It was a place to get better from alcohol, but I was the only one in there for alcohol. Everybody else was in there for like really crazy reasons. They were all super rich people that were in this hospital. And they were truly insane. I mean, I was the only one that was actually there for alcohol. So when I got out, I said, Bernie, we sat down and wrote the album just from the characters, for Veronica's sake, Jackknife Johnny. All these characters were real people in there, Millie and Billy. And Bob Ezrin was working on, I think, Pink Floyd or somebody at the time. So I decided David Foster got involved. David Foster loved what we were doing, loved the idea. Basically, the band on that was Toto.
Yeah, if Steve Lukather played it on, right? Yeah.
Lukather and the Picaro brothers were all the backup band. They were, and then of course I had Davy Johnstone on it. I had Lukather, like I said, a bunch of people were coming in because they were all. I had Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire. The only duet he ever did in his life was Quiet Room. He had never done a duet with anybody, and he said he never wanted to do a duet, but he loved that song, and he says, well, Alice and I will do this song. And so that was the only duet Maurice White ever did. And I think that may be the best musical album we ever did.
Yeah,
Everything
I completely agree.
Flo and Eddie did all the background singing on it. And it was so varied. The very first song, From the Inside, was basically dun, 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 dun. And the show went right along with it, with the dancing bottles and all this stuff, But it was the most musical album. And David Foster, one time in an interview, he'd done everything from Whitney Houston to everybody you could think of.
And he says, the most fun I ever had doing an album was From the Inside with Alice, because it was so creative. We allowed everyone to be creative in the whole thing. And it ended up just being a little gem of an album.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I love the show that goes along with that. You did the DVD with that, and the video and the big car that came out during
Cheryl was born in Beverly Hills, and she was a dancing Scotch bottle, and it was really, the show was so much fun to work with. The show was just that show was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one little request is, I hope one day you sneak in "How You Gonna See Me Now," because that's my favorite Alice Cooper song of all time. So one day, sneak that in there.
The truth in that song was this: I'd been married to Cheryl for 5 years. No, I was never drunk. I was never falling down drunk. I was never abusive. I was always funny. And that was the problem. It was that nobody saw the problem. And so when I went into the hospital, I thought for myself, wait a minute, I'm going to come out of here sober. What if she doesn't love the sober version of me? And that's where the song was born, right there. You're sitting at home and I'm going to come home sober. And what if we don't click?
Yeah.
And that was the heart of it. Of course, I knew that wasn't the truth, but it was a great romantic thought, and it turned into a song. And it was, honestly, I think one of the 3 best songs we've ever written.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think, it's the fact that it was also so personal. When things are personal like that, it adds so much to a track and to a song. So
yeah, there's a real story behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, it meant something to you when you're writing it. So thank you so much, Alice, for taking the time to sit down and speak with me today. It was such an honor to have you on, and it meant a lot. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll see you backstage. Whenever we're in town, you have got the golden backstage pass. So come back and say hi.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much.